SeaWorld is keeping a close eye on a killer whale blamed for killing a trainer.
For a decade, she ruled the waters. An orca trainer whose skill made her a legend. With just a glance, she could command the ocean's most feared hunter. She had earned the trust of a predator that could end her in seconds. But under the bright June sun, before hundreds of eyes, that trust cracked. What turned a perfect performance into an unforgettable tragedy? Stay with us to find out. Before we dive into the tragedy that shook Blue Sea Sanctuary, let's go back to the dream that started. A dream born by the sea. Long before the screams and the blood in the water. Before the headlines that would leave the world stunned, there was just a quiet girl standing on the edge of a rocky shore in northern France, staring out at the ocean like it was something she knew by heart. While the world around her played, laughed and forgot, Elise Moreau watched the sea with the quiet intensity of someone listening for something no one else could hear. Not a dreamer nor a tourist, but something else entirely, like she was already part of the ocean, and it was just waiting to take her back. While most kids drew superheroes, Elise Moreau was sketching killers. Killer whales, to be exact. She wasn't afraid of them. She was fascinated. Most children her age were glued to cartoons or chasing soccer balls. But Elise was studying the curve of an orca's fin, like it held the answer to something sacred. The sea wasn't warm or welcoming in Brittany. But Elise didn't care. Every distant cry of a seabird only pulled her deeper into a dream that didn't make sense to anyone but her. Her parents chalked it up to a phase, something she'd grow out of. But she never did. Every summer they'd drive her to the coast so she could watch the waves. She never said much. Yeah, she didn't have to. That look on her face, focused, distant, almost reverent, said everything. By the time she was 14, she knew the Latin names of every orca species. At 17, she was emailing marine parks across the world, asking for internships. And just after her 19th birthday, Elise did something no one expected. She packed her things and left France behind. She didn't know anyone in California. She didn't have much money, but she had one goal: get to Blue Sea Marine Park, the one place she'd dreamed of since she was a kid. And somehow she made it happen. She arrived at Blue Sea Sanctuary with nothing but a backpack and that stubborn ambition. Elise started where everyone else did, scrubbing algae from concrete and lugging buckets of thawed fish that stank up her clothes. But she was patient and focused. Her co-workers noticed quickly. Elise didn't just do her job. She read the animals. She could tell when a dolphin was agitated before it even surfaced. And she could calm a sea lion with just a shift in tone. Word spread fast and promotions followed. Within months she was working directly with the orcas, the giants she had once only drawn. But Elise wasn't chasing applause. She was chasing something deeper. And then she met Kayla, Blue Sea's star orca, massive, majestic, unpredictable. Their connection was immediate, eerie almost. Elise called it a bond. Others whispered a different word, obsession. But there was something else, a shadow trailing behind every perfect show, every high five between species. Kayla had a history, something the older trainers wouldn't talk about. They whispered about it, but maybe it was forgotten or purposely buried. And buried things have a way of resurfacing, especially in deep, dark water. Kayla's stolen freedom. She was born in the wild, in deep, dark water, where the ocean stretches endlessly, and every sound the water made meant something. But when you rip an orca from her family and lock her behind glass, something inside her doesn't just break, it waits. And years later, when everyone thought she had finally settled, Kayla reminded them that orcas never forget. But how did this orca end up in a glass? Let's rewind the clock to 1995, off Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula. Somewhere beneath that grey churn, Kayla, a young orca, barely 5, slid through the water beside her mother, her family tight at her side. They hunted together, swam together, and spoke in a language built over generations, and then it shattered. Speedboats burst across the waves, slicing the sea like blades. Nets exploded into the water, walls of nylon closing in with terrifying speed. Kayla's pod scattered. She tried to follow her mother's cry, but the sound was swallowed in the chaos, with engines revving and men yelling. Kayla fought to break free, her sleek body twisting in panic, but the ropes pulled tighter. And then came the needle, followed by darkness and silence. When she woke, the world was a concrete jungle. Her ocean was gone and her family too. For years, Kayla was shuffled between holding tanks like a piece of inventory, metal walls, echoing pumps, and water that didn't move. Trainers labeled her difficult. She refused food, slammed her tail against tank walls with such force that it cracked the lining. She snapped at hands that got too close. It wasn't rebellion, it was grief. And grief has a memory. By the time Blue Sea got her, Kayla was 12 and massive. 16 feet of muscle and mystery. The crowd saw beauty, the trainers saw a star, but Kayla, she saw a cage. And behind those deep black eyes, something never settled. Not the praise, nor the whistles, nor the claps, nor the spotlight. They called her a gentle giant. But even giants can break. Orcas don't forget. Their minds are built like ours, wired. For family, for emotion, and sometimes for vengeance. In the wild, Kayla would have stayed with her mother for the rest of her life. But here, she circled a tank barely 4 times her length, her dorsal fin bent like a flag at half-mast. And still, no one really talked about what had been taken from her. But Kayla remembered, and that memory, that instinct buried beneath the surface, it was about to come face to face with the one woman who believed she could control it, Elise Moreau. And for a time she believed Kayla loved her back. A bond beyond the tank. Some connections are hard to explain. So deep, so unshakable. They feel like they belong to another world. Elise Moreau had one of those with Kayla, and for years it was her greatest strength until the day it became her biggest mistake. Before the crowds arrived, before the music and the applause, Elise would stand at the water's edge in the morning. Fog, sometimes barefoot, sometimes with a sketchbook folded under her arm, just talking in that quiet, steady way of hers. No whistles, no hand signals, just her voice, low and calm, carrying over the still water. From the depths, Kayla would rise. 6 tons of muscle moving like silk, gliding toward Elise with a trust that seemed unshakable. To anyone watching, it was like watching 2 old friends who didn't need words. To outsiders, it looked like magic, like Kayla could hear her thoughts. And maybe that's what scared the others, because Elise truly believed they understood each other beyond training signals and food rewards. To Elise, Kayla wasn't a performer. She was a partner. She'd spend breaks sketching Kayla's leaps in a worn notebook, planning new tricks to keep her engaged. Elise believed she knew Kayla better than anyone. Every flick of her fin, every low click she made underwater. But not everyone was so sure. James, a new trainer barely 6 months in, noticed things like Kayla hesitating at the start of rehearsals, holding her breath longer than usual, refusing a cue. Sometimes she'd fix her, eyes on the audience, not in curiosity, but with a cold, unnatural focus. He brought it up casually, but Elise brushed it off, smiling. She's just being Kayla, she'd say, her trust rock solid. Most days it worked. Kayla would nail every spin, every breach, her 6-ton body moving like it was choreographed by the ocean itself. Then came the day Kayla popped her jaw during a dry run. A quick, aggressive snap underwater. Trainers knew that sound. It wasn't cute, it wasn't playful, it was a warning. Elise laughed. She's just being spicy, she said. But James locked eyes with another trainer across the platform. No one said a word, but the silence was loaded because deep down they'd all seen it. Tiny shifts in Kayla's behavior, a split-second delay in response, and a strange stiffness in her rolls. Elise ignored them all, trusting the history they shared more than the signs in front of her. And up until that week, it had worked. Kayla had nailed every stunt, hit every mark, and made the audience gasp on cue. But bonds, no matter how deep, can fray without warning. And when they snap, they don't make a sound until it's too late. And it was too late because the next cue Elise gave didn't just go unanswered. It triggered something no one could have. Predicted. If this story has you on edge already, take a second to hit the like button. The stage is set. In the water, trust is everything. For years, Elise Moreau and Kayla had moved as one. Every signal answered, every leap perfectly timed, a moment in the spotlight, a quiet promise between them. But on this day, that promise felt different. No one could quite name it. And maybe that's why no one stopped the show. June 12th in Santa Cruz was the kind of day people dream about. Sun blazing over a cloudless sky. The air warm and thick with the smell of salt and sunscreen. The Blue Sea Sanctuary was alive and overflowing. Families walking into the stands. Children hugging balloons shaped like the very animal they'd come to see. Parents fanning themselves with the programs. Inside the open-air amphitheater, every seat was taken. Parents flipped through programs while their kids bounced with excitement. And then the music hit. That thumping, overproduced soundtrack that always meant something big was about to happen. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed, "please welcome Elise Moreau and the Queen of the Deep, Kayla." The place exploded with cheers, whistles, phones raised high in the air, and 800 people swept up in the spectacle. And behind the curtain, Elise zipped up her wetsuit and took a breath like she'd done 1,000 times before. Calm, steady, and not even a flicker of doubt on her face. But behind that curtain, not everyone was smiling. Earlier that morning, Elise had run through the routine with Kayla. The dramatic breaches, synchronized spins, and the grand finale. The rocket hop that sent Elise soaring high above the water like she was flying. It had gone fine on paper, but Kayla hadn't seemed normal. She was sluggish. Her movements were off. Instead of slicing through the tank like usual, she drifted, almost hesitated. Her left pectoral fin kept twitching just slightly, like something in her was misfiring. Elise laughed it off. "She's saving her energy," she said with that grin everyone trusted. "She knows it's showtime." Most of the trainers bought it, except James. He'd been with Kayla within the week, and something about her eyes that morning had stuck with him. They weren't playful, they weren't curious, they were locked in, fixed, like she was tracking something invisible, like something was about to move. Still, the show had to go on. The gates lifted. Kayla slipped into the spotlight, her sleek black and white body cutting through the tank like a blade. The crowd gasped, phones clicked, and the kids shrieked with joy. Elise stepped forward, arms wide, the star of the show. Everything looked perfect. But that uneasy feeling, the one James couldn't shake, it hadn't gone anywhere. It was just waiting, and the crowd, lost in the thrill of the moment, didn't see it coming. Not until it was far too late. The attack unleashed. It began the way so many tragedies do quietly. There were no screams or warnings, just a shift, so small you could miss it if you weren't the one standing on the edge of the tank. As usual, Elise raised the whistle to her lips, the signal as familiar to her as breathing, signaling Kayla to make a signature move. Kayla should have responded instantly, bursting into motion like she'd done 1,000 times before. But she didn't. The Orca paused under the surface, motionless, but for the faint twitch of her pectoral fins. The crowd waited. Elise waited and then whistled again. This time she added a gentle vocal cue, her voice warm and coaxing. "Thup, girl, let's go, still nothing." Instead, Kayla drifted forward, slow, deliberate, her bulk slicing through the water without a sound. At the last moment, she veered off course, brushing past Elise's legs with the heavy, cold weight of something, alive and ancient. The contact made Elise's skin prickle. She gave a small, awkward laugh into her mic. "She's feeling playful today," she told the audience, masking the unease in her voice. A few people chuckled. Kayla doubled back. The movement was sudden, too fast to track, and then there was an impact, a blunt force from below that knocked Elise clean off her feet and into the water. The splash drew gasps from the stands, but they weren't alarmed yet. From a distance, it could still be part of the act. Then the water changed. It stirred violently as Kayla clamped her jaws around Elise's left arm. The bite was quick and precise. Elise's scream was swallowed by the tank. Blood spiraled upward in slow ribbons. She thrashed, bubbles breaking at the surface, her free hand clawing for the edge. The trainers on deck froze, caught between disbelief and action. Kayla didn't let go. She dragged Elise under, the black and white mass spinning her in a brutal, predatory roll. They burst back into view, Kayla thrashing the limp trainer in full sight of hundreds. Now it was clear to all that this was no longer a show, but a full-blown attack. Gasps turned to screams, and mothers were seen shielding their children's faces. Somewhere someone shouted, "That's not part of the show." Elise broke the surface once, just long enough to gulp air. her face pale with panic. She reached for the platform, almost touched it, before Kayla yanked her under again, and harder this time. Alarms blared. Trainers scrambled for nets. A buoy splashed into the tank in a desperate attempt to draw Kayla away, but she ignored it. Not because she wanted to, but because she was growing weary under the fierce battle with the predator. The attack lasted less than 2 minutes, but every second stretched into something unbearable. When Kayla finally released her, Elise floated motionless, hair fanning around her like seaweed, eyes open but unseeing. And then, shockingly, Kayla struck again. She clamped down on her torso this time, the force churning the water into a red froth. Elise's body jerked under the grip, her legs kicking weakly before disappearing into the deep. The music, still cheery and looping, played for a few surreal seconds longer before someone cut the sound. The only thing left was chaos, the slap of water against glass, the shouts of trainers, and the rising panic in the stands. A headset floated to the surface. Elise's. It bobbed once, twice, then drifted toward the far wall as Kayla's shadow moved deeper into the blue, pulling her far from the glass, far from rescue. The show wasn't over. It had just turned into something primal. And the worst part, this was only the beginning. 9 minutes of terror. You'd think 9 minutes couldn't possibly change everything, but in that tank, 9 minutes felt like a lifetime. Kayla wasn't playing. She wasn't performing. She was dragging Elise down with terrifying precision, twisting her body with the raw power of a 6-ton predator. Each time Elise surfaced, gasping, eyes wide, her lips stained with blood, the sound of the crowd rose like a wave of panic. People weren't cheering anymore. They were screaming. And through it all, Kayla kept going. Not the playful companion Elise once danced with in front of hundreds, but something unrecognizable, her eyes blank, her grip brutal. Teenagers stood frozen, phones shaking in their hands, still filming. The water was streaked red now, thick clouds of it swirling beneath the glass like smoke. "Do something!" someone yelled. Trainers rushed in, their voices cracking as they shouted Kayla's name, trying to pull her back into routine. They threw fish, bright buoys, and slapped poles against the tank. Nothing. James, barely holding it together, tried to launch the emergency. A net, but it tangled. He cursed, ripping at it with shaking hands, while Elise was flung into the wall with a force that silenced the crowd. There was a sickening sound like wet wood cracking. Elise came up again, barely, her arm twisted, her face pale and slack, mouth coughing up blood and salt. She reached for the platform so close, fingers scraping the edge, and then Kayla pulled her back under, this time deeper. Lights turned red. Alarms screamed, but Kayla didn't flinch. She circled the tank like she owned it, dragging Elise's limp form in slow, deliberate laps. Her torn wetsuit floated behind, her face hidden under strands of dark-soaked hair. The divers hesitated at the edge, torn between training and fear. One by one, they dove, knowing full well Kayla could kill again in a second. The crowd unhinged. Some sprinted out, sobbing. Others stood rooted, unable to move, watching horror unfold like a nightmare they couldn't wake from. You could hear kids crying, parents whispering, "It's okay," when it clearly wasn't. 9 minutes, that's how long it lasted. But for everyone in that stadium, it felt like forever. But the nightmare didn't end there. What came next would haunt them even more. Share this with friends who think they've seen it all, because what happened next will prove them wrong. The silence after the storm. The show was over, but no one clapped, no one moved. It was just silence, the kind that doesn't settle, but swells. The surface of the tank had gone eerily still, as if trying to erase what had just happened. But the damage couldn't be wiped away. Elise Moreau was pulled from the water like a broken doll, limp, battered, barely recognizable. Her wetsuit was shredded. Her limbs twisted in ways the human body was never meant to bend. Her lifeless eyes fixed on nothing. Kayla floated nearby, her massive form drifting like a shadow with no weight, no urgency, as if the Orca had already moved on. But the humans hadn't. Paramedics stormed in, slipping on puddles, their latex gloves, shaking as they tried to revive someone they all knew was long gone. Still, they pumped her chest again and again, surrounded by the sickening smell of chlorine and panic. The crowd didn't scream anymore. The arena, minutes ago echoing with laughter, now sounded like a church after a funeral. Parents shielded their children's eyes. Security moved quickly, but their voices were hushed, more mournful than commanding. "Keep walking," they said. But no one walked like they were leaving a theme park. They walked like they were leaving a crime scene. Backstage it was worse. James couldn't stop shaking. The tank that once resonated with music and cheers now buzzed with the faint hum of medical machines and the chilling wail of someone in the stands, likely a mother who had just watched a nightmare unfold in real time. Outside, news vans began lining up like vultures on a fence. Cameras cocked and ready. Headlines were already being typed before Elise's body had even left the platform. Inside, the park was shutting down, lights out, gates locked, rides frozen. Mid-motion, the whole place felt like a stage abandoned after the final unplanned act. And then came the whispers from the staff, from the trainers, from the ones who'd worked with Kayla and seen things they were told not to talk about. Incidents that were brushed off, close calls swept under the rug. There had been warnings, plenty of them, but they'd all been silenced because Elise and Kayla were Blue Sea's money-printing duo, the face of every poster, the heart of every brochure. Now Elise was gone. And the silence wasn't just mourning, it was something heavier. It was the weight of secrets about to explode. And those secrets, they were more than just whispers. They were buried truths that were about to claw their way to the surface. And this time no PR team could hold them back, a legacy that haunts. They tried to bury the truth, but the story wouldn't stay dead, and neither would the questions. The morning after Elise's death, Blue Sea didn't feel like a theme park. It felt like a crime scene. The gates were locked tight, security guards pacing with radios glued to their ears, and a swarm of news vans parked outside. Satellite dishes pointed like weapons. Inside, the tank was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the same pool where Elise had lost her life just hours earlier, and now it reflected nothing but tension. That silence cracked fast. Federal investigators showed up early, and they weren't alone. Animal rights groups had already caught wind of what happened. They came with questions, and within days they uncovered what Blue Sea had spent years trying to hide. Leaked files started surfacing online, and what they revealed was ugly. Kayla hadn't just snapped. There were warning signs, years of them, incidents buried in routine reports, notes about lunges, unpredictable behavior, moments when Kayla slammed into the tank walls. Hard enough to rattle the stands, but none of it made headlines back then. It was all filed under manageable risk. Fans who'd once cheered Elise in the splash zone now flooded forums and comment sections, demanding to know why no one had stepped in, why no one had protected her and her family. They didn't hold back. Then came the lawsuit. Elise's parents filed a wrongful death claim, accusing Blue Sea of ignoring red flags and prioritizing profit over safety. Protests followed. Some demanded justice for Elise, others demanded freedom for Kayla. Candles lined the gates. Handwritten signs fluttered in the breeze. The crowd chanted both names, one lost, the other trapped. Online, the outrage only grew. Footage of the attack went viral, triggering global backlash. Calls to shut down Blue Sea grew louder by the hour. Lawmakers in California jumped in, fast-tracking a bill that aimed to ban captive Orca performances altogether. The park's once sparkling reputation dulled almost overnight. And Kayla. She didn't disappear, but she may as well have. They moved her to a private tank out of view, isolated from guests. Trainers were ordered to keep their distance. Her dorsal fin, once a proud, tall curve, now drooped like a flag at half-mast. Elise's death didn't just shock the world. It shattered the illusion. The idea that wild animals could be tamed, taught, and trusted inside a concrete pool. She loved Kayla deeply, but that love wasn't enough to override instinct or undo a lifetime of captivity. And here's what keeps people up at night. Kayla's still there, still circling and watching. Is it over, or is it only a matter of time? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Should orcas like Kayla be in captivity? Subscribe for more stories that hit hard. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.